Here is something strange to think about. Every mammal on Earth drinks milk as a baby and then stops forever. The body simply loses the ability to digest it. But somewhere, about 10,000 years ago, a small group of humans developed something unusual, the ability to keep drinking milk as adults. And that one biological change may have altered the course of human history. This is the story of milk, a liquid so ordinary that most people never think about it, but one that quietly shaped which civilizations survived and which ones collapsed, which populations grew and which stayed small, which empires were built and which ones never had the chance. Milk did not just feed babies. Milk changed what it means to be human. To understand why milk matters, we need to start with a gene. A single gene, called LCT. This gene controls the production of lactase, an enzyme in your gut that breaks down lactose, the sugar found in milk. As babies, all humans produce lactase. It allows us to digest our mother's milk, but in most humans, the gene switches off after weaning. When lactase stops and you drink milk, the lactose passes undigested into your lower intestine. Bacteria ferment it. The result is bloating, gas, cramping, sometimes severe pain, sometimes vomiting. This condition is called lactose intolerance. And here is the surprising fact. Lactose intolerance is actually the normal human condition. Being able to drink milk as an adult is the mutation. About 10,000 years ago, in the ancient Middle East and in parts of Africa, humans began domesticating cattle, not primarily for milk, but for meat and for labor. Cattle could pull plows. They provided meat and leather. Their dung could fertilize fields and fuel fires. Cattle were extraordinarily useful animals, but their milk was largely ignored because almost nobody could digest it. Then something changed. A mutation appeared in a small human population somewhere in Europe or Africa around 7500 BC. A random genetic mutation that kept the lactase gene switched on, even in adults. People with this mutation could drink milk without getting sick. For most of human history, this mutation would have meant nothing. But at that moment, it meant everything. Why did this mutation spread so quickly? Because of what milk provided. Milk is extraordinarily nutritious. It contains protein, fat, calcium, vitamins A, D, and B12. And crucially, in a world before clean water, before refrigeration, before modern agriculture, milk was a liquid food that could be obtained, fresh, every single day, from an animal you could own. In times of famine, when crops failed, when hunting was poor, cattle could keep people alive, not by being slaughtered, because a dead animal gives you meat once, but by being milked, because a living animal gives you food every single day for years. People who could drink that milk survived famines that killed their neighbors. Their children inherited the mutation. and so it spread. The spread of the lactase mutation is one of the fastest known examples of natural selection in recent human evolution. In just a few thousand years, the mutation went from essentially nobody to the majority of people in Northern and Western Europe. Today, about 35% of adults worldwide can drink milk without problems. In Northern Europe, the number rises to over 90%. But here is something fascinating. Even before the lactase mutation became widespread, humans had found a way to drink milk by turning it into fermented products: cheese, yogurt, butter. The fermentation process breaks down most of the lactose, making dairy products digestible even by people. Without the mutation, cheese may have been invented before people could drink milk. The earliest evidence of cheese making dates to about 8,000 years ago in what is now Poland. Pottery strainers with traces of milk fat were found at archaeological sites. They look remarkably similar to modern cheese-making equipment. People were making cheese thousands of years before the pyramids were built, thousands of years before writing existed. In ancient Mesopotamia, one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made is a stone frieze from about 3000 BC, showing what appears to be a dairy operation. Men are milking cattle, others are straining the milk, making butter and cheese. In the temple of Ninhursag, the Sumerian goddess of birth and life, dairy was so important that it was connected to the divine. Ancient Egypt had an interesting relationship with milk. Egyptian art and texts rarely mention cow's milk directly. Egyptians preferred goat and sheep milk and the cheeses made from them. But cattle were sacred in ancient Egypt. The goddess Hathor was depicted as a cow or as a woman with cow's horns. She was the goddess of love, beauty, and motherhood. The cow's milk connected to the divine feminine. In ancient India, the cow became the most sacred animal. The Vedic texts, written between 1500 and 500 BC, describe dairy products as among the most important of all offerings to the gods. Ghee, clarified butter, was poured into sacred fires. Milk was offered at temples. Yogurt was mixed with rice for ritual meals. The cow was not just useful, it was holy. In ancient Greece and Rome, milk was drunk, but considered more appropriate for barbarians and children. Romans believed drinking fresh milk was uncivilized. The civilized thing was to process it into cheese or butter first. Roman soldiers carried hard cheese on long military campaigns. It was light, lasting, and nutritious. Roman cheese fed the armies. That built an empire. The nomadic peoples of the Eurasian steppes had perhaps the most complete dairy culture in history. The Mongols, the Scythians, the early Turks, these horse-riding peoples depended on dairy almost completely. They drank fermented mare's milk, called kumis. They made dried cheese curds, called arul, that they carried on long journeys. Their entire military power depended on dairy nutrition. Genghis Khan's warriors could travel extraordinary distances without stopping to find food because they carried dried milk products that weighed almost nothing but provided concentrated nutrition. They also had emergency rations of dried blood mixed with dried dairy products that could keep them alive for days on a forced march. The mobility that made the Mongols unstoppable was partly powered by milk. In medieval Europe, dairy became central to the monastery system. Benedictine monks, who could not eat meat, on many days of the religious calendar, depended heavily on cheese as their primary protein source. Monasteries became centers of cheese-making innovation. The great European cheese traditions, Brie, Roquefort, Gruyère, Gouda, were largely developed by monks. The cheese-making monks were essentially running the food technology laboratories of the medieval world. They had time, they had patience, they had cellars with consistent temperatures. They had the organizational structure to maintain traditions across generations. Roquefort cheese was already being aged in the caves of Combalou in southern France by 1070 AD. It is one of the oldest protected food products in the world. Meanwhile, in Northern Europe, the dairy industry was expanding in a different direction. The Dutch, in the lowlands of Holland, were becoming the greatest dairy farmers in the medieval world. Dutch cattle breeds were developed specifically for milk production. Dutch cheese, Gouda and Edam, were being exported across Europe and beyond. The Industrial Revolution changed milk completely. Before industrialization, most milk was consumed very close to where it was produced. Because milk spoils quickly in warm temperatures without refrigeration, urban people had limited access to fresh milk. What milk was available in cities was often contaminated. In the 1800s, contaminated milk was killing thousands of children. Then came Louis Pasteur. In 1864, the French scientist discovered that heating milk to a specific temperature for a specific time killed the dangerous bacteria without destroying the milk. He called this process pasteurization. It was one of the most important public health discoveries in human history. Child mortality from milk-borne disease dropped dramatically. Railways changed milk too. For the first time, fresh milk could travel from countryside to city quickly enough to remain fresh. By the late 1800s, New York City was receiving millions of gallons of fresh milk by train from upstate New York every single day. The glass milk bottle was invented in 1884. The milk delivery system was becoming modern. The 20th century brought mechanical milking machines, then electric refrigeration, then homogenization, which prevented the cream from separating to the top, then vitamin fortification, adding vitamins A and D to make milk even more nutritious. The doorstep milk delivery became a symbol of modern, safe, abundant food supply. The glass bottle, with its foil cap, on the doorstep every morning. Governments got involved in milk too. In Britain, after the Second World War, the government provided free milk to all school children. In America, the National School Lunch Program included milk as a mandatory component. The logic was simple. Children who drank milk were better nourished. Better nourished children learned better, grew taller, were healthier. Milk became a policy tool. The dairy industry grew into one of the largest agricultural sectors on Earth. Selective breeding created extraordinary cattle. A modern Holstein dairy cow can produce over 10,000 liters of milk per year. The same wild ancestor would have produced only enough milk for her own calf. A few hundred liters at most. We had engineered an animal for pure milk production. But the 21st century has brought new questions about milk. More people than ever are choosing not to drink it. Some because of lactose intolerance, some because of animal welfare concerns, some because of environmental concerns. The dairy industry is one of the significant contributors to greenhouse gas emissions. Cows produce methane. Dairy farming uses enormous amounts of water and land. Plant-based milk alternatives have grown into a billion-dollar industry. Oat milk, almond milk, soy milk, coconut milk, rice milk, hemp milk. Oat milk in particular has grown extraordinarily fast, from a niche product to being available in every coffee shop in the world. The traditional dairy industry is facing competition it has never faced before, and milk has been at the center of some surprising cultural battles. The European Union has strict rules about what can be called milk. Legally, only dairy milk from animals can be called milk in the EU. Oat milk must be called oat drink. Almond milk must be called almond drink. The word milk has become legally contested territory. Milk also tells us something about human genetics in a remarkably clear way. The distribution of lactase persistence across the world directly follows the history of cattle herding. Populations that herded cattle for thousands of years have high rates of lactase persistence. Populations that did not have low rates. Our ability to drink milk is literally written in our DNA by our ancestors' history. The Irish have one of the highest rates of lactase persistence in the world. Nearly 100% of Irish adults can drink milk without problems. Ireland also has one of the most powerful dairy industries in the world relative to its size. Ireland exports butter, cheese, and milk powder to over 140 countries. Dairy is not just part of Irish culture. Dairy is Irish culture. East Asia presents a fascinating contrast. In China, Japan, and Korea, lactose intolerance rates approach 90% of the population. Traditional East Asian cuisine has almost no dairy, no milk, no cheese, no butter. The greatest cuisines in human history were developed without a single dairy ingredient, which shows that milk was never essential to human nutrition, just extraordinarily useful to those who could digest it. Africa has a more complex story. Most Africans are lactose intolerant, but the pastoral peoples of East Africa, the Maasai of Kenya and Tanzania, the Dinka of South Sudan, the Fulani of West Africa, have high rates of lactase persistence. These cattle-herding peoples consume extraordinary amounts of dairy. The Maasai traditionally drank fermented milk mixed with cattle blood as their primary food. The butter-making tradition has produced one of the strangest archaeological discoveries in history: bog butter. For thousands of years, people in Ireland and Scotland buried butter in peat bogs to preserve it. The cold, acidic, oxygen-free conditions of the bog preserved the butter. For centuries, archaeologists have found butter thousands of years old, still technically edible, though nobody has been brave enough to try it. Butter itself has had an extraordinary history of its own. In medieval Europe, butter was taxed. In some regions, paying your church taxes in butter was permitted. During Lent, the Catholic Church prohibited the eating of butter, but wealthy people could pay for a special dispensation, allowing them to eat butter anyway. The North Tower of Rouen Cathedral in France was partly financed by butter dispensation payments. Milk has also played a surprising role in political propaganda. The Got Milk campaign in America, beginning in 1993, was one of the most successful advertising campaigns in food history. Famous celebrities photographed with milk mustaches. The campaign ran for 20 years. It became part of American culture, and it was entirely funded by the dairy industry to counter declining milk consumption. Today, the world produces about 900 million tons of milk every year. India is the world's largest producer of milk. Despite having a population with significant lactose intolerance, India achieves this by producing largely fermented dairy products, yogurt, paneer, ghee, lassi, which are more digestible. The world's biggest dairy nation found its own way to use milk wisely, from the wild steppes where the first cattle were domesticated, to the ancient temples where milk was offered to gods, from the cheese caves of Roquefort to the railway milk trains of Victorian England, from Pasteur's laboratory to the school milk bottles of a million 1950s classrooms, from the Got Milk campaign to the oat milk revolution of the 21st century. Milk has been with us every step of the way. But perhaps the most remarkable thing about milk is not what it did to civilization. It is what it did to our bodies. We changed what we ate, and then our bodies changed to match what we ate. We did not just adapt milk for human use. Milk adapted humans in return. That is evolution happening in real time, driven by a glass of milk. The next time you pour milk into your coffee, or eat a piece of cheese, or spread butter on toast, or open a yogurt, Remember, you are participating in a 10,000-year relationship between humans and cattle, a relationship that changed your DNA, that built empires, that fed armies, that saved children, that helped create the world you live in, all from one animal, one remarkable liquid, one extraordinary drink. Thank you for watching this story on Storia English. If you enjoyed learning English through this story, please subscribe to Storia English. Every week we bring you a new story from history, told in clear, slow, simple English, so you can improve your listening, vocabulary, and confidence, naturally, without stress. We will see you in the next story.